He is a cherished and trusted name in sports media. It is the great Rick Jaffe. How I got him on, I don't even know. But he is head of digital video at Sinclair Broadcast Group, has worked with Fox, has worked with several other major entities. And we're going to tell his story, learn more about his professional rise, but also from a personal standpoint as well, and point out what's inspirational and what a good guy he is, because there's a lot of reasons as to how he is. This is the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio, on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. Rick, I am so grateful for a couple minutes of your time. I guess my first question for you as I welcome you on is, Laura Oakman said about you once, she said, everything is better with Rick Jaffe behind the wheel. What is she getting at there, Rick?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Laura is one of the best talent I've ever worked with. I think part of it is listening, Bryan. I mean, we want all of our bosses to listen when we talk to them. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned a long time ago. If you listen, people will do a lot for you. So that's one of the keys, I think.
Good listener is certainly something that can lead to being a better interviewer. It can lead to a lot of things positively happening. If I were to listen to you as a little league announcer back in the day, what am I going to hear from you?
Well, it's all about repetition, Bryan. As you know, the more you do it, the better you get in this game. And so just be yourself. I mean, that's one of the things that I tell young talent coming up. Just be yourself. And you can't teach personality. You can teach a lot of things, but you can't teach personality. And I remember in going to a couple of my friends who I'd worked with before became, professors at USC. And I remember going to speak at a class, and I brought 50 DVDs one day. I'm dating myself right away with the DVD reference, but I said, I got these 50 this week. What's going to make you different from these 50 people that I have right here? And it's personality.
Why do you think your personality is so endearing and is so glowing in this business?
I look at, when I work with somebody, it's more of a collaboration than, oh, I'm your boss and you're going to do it this way. And I think the more you collaborate with people, the more you get out of it for both sides.
Speaking of collaboration, you helped author a book with Mike Pereira. How would you size up your writing skills and what you were able to convey in that piece of novel?
Well, I started in the newspaper business a long time ago when I first started in my career, right out of high school, at the Orlando Sentinel. And so I was a writer in the beginning and didn't cross over to being an editor, producer till later on, maybe 4 or 5 years into my career. But I had been, so when I got assigned to help produce Mike Pereira, when David Hill signed him to Fox, Hill said, Rick, you're going to be his producer. So anything he wants to write, any video he wants to do, you got to help him.
Wow.
So besides my day job, I had to produce Mr. Pereira on the weekends, but it was a pleasure because he was such a joy to work with. And, when you're with somebody long enough, you learn. So I would write stories for him on Fox Sports, and I'd listen to him talk throughout the day. I'd write up a story and then I'd have him read it. And after, I don't know, a couple of months, he goes, how do you know what I'm going to say? I go, well, because I sit with you every weekend, so I kind of know what you're going to say. And from there, it ended up being a publisher had approached him about writing a book about himself, his life story. And so I think they offered him like 3 or 4 other writers. And then Mike said, I don't want those 3 or 4 other writers. Rick writes my stuff, so I'd rather have him write it. So that's how that all came to pass.
How did you find your writing voice? What did that look like from your perspective at a very early stage in your career?
Reading other writers, reading really good writers and seeing how they wrote, how they went about their business. It's a lot of it, whether it's in the newspaper business or whether it's in television, it's all about preparation. So do your homework ahead of time, prepare, get ready. And I mean, that's, for Mike and I said, okay, we couldn't do it during the football season because we were both too busy. But I said, I need like 4 days with you alone that we can just talk about chapters, what we're going to write, how you're going to write it, what do you want to say, what the chapters are going to be. And so he had a place in Mexico that we went to for 4 days, and I just interviewed him basically. And so, all day long, I mean, we had a blast, but all day long, I would just sit there with the tape recorder and interview him and say, all right, well, what do you want to talk about this? And what do you want to talk about that? And so that's kind of how that came to be. And it was fun. And then, I went home and I would write a chapter and then I'd email it to him and say, all right, what do you think about this? And then we get on the phone and talk about it. But he was funny. Sometimes he goes, read it to me. I want to hear how it sounds. So we did that.
What went into you forming questions to throw at him and how you were able to get out of him what you were hoping for?
So when we would sit there, I would, I go, all right, when we were trying to figure out what the chapters were going to be, and then I'd hear him say something, which, I mean, again, that's part of the interviewing process. And you even know that one of the things that you need to do as an interviewer is listen, because you can have a list of questions. And I made up some questions that I would write down before, all right, today we're going to talk about this. And I would have some questions, but invariably they change over and over again just by what he said. And so I would listen to what he said, and you'd form other questions by just talking to him. And I think that goes for any interview. Sometimes you're watching an interview or on television, and you could tell a reporter's got scripted questions, and the person who they're interviewing will say something, and the reporter will go on to the next question, and you're going, wait a minute, he just said that. How come you're not asking him about that? And so, I mean, that's one of the things I learned early on as well, is got to be a good listener.
You definitely do, because as you said, you can miss a great follow-up question if you're not listening. We are joined by the great Rick Jaffe. I am Bryan Fenley. This is the On to Something podcast, and I am on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. So listening and being able to formulate questions off an answer is huge, and that ability to adjust. You've also been able to adjust in your career. What do you attribute that to be able to be so free-flowing and versatile?
I was always interested in sports right from the beginning, and I knew I was never going to be, even in junior high, I knew, okay, I'm never going to be good enough to play professional. I played high school baseball, but that was about it. So I knew what I wanted to do, and then I just went after it with the passion that I had for sports. And as you grow, you learn things. And, when I went to Fox Sports, I had no television experience whatsoever.
Wow.
And so I had gone from, I was sports editor of the LA Times, and I'd gone to foxsports.com back in 2000. And at that time, the LA Times was still the LA Times. And people thought, what are you doing? Are you out of your mind? And so, but I had never been on the digital side before then either. And so I got some experience doing that. And then a year later, I went to the television side, and it was just kind of on the job training. You learn as you go. And I learned a lot along the way. In 16 years at Fox, I did many different things. Oversaw the news division. I executive produced probably about 12 different shows various times. But you learn, and you need to learn quickly, or else you won't be doing it very long. But it's been a very enjoyable ride.
To be able to take on challenges like you have and succeed in doing them, especially like you said, you come from a newspaper background. What is it about the way you learn, the way you're able to learn quickly, where you're able to take things that maybe you don't have as firm of a background on, and then you're able to excel in it regardless?
I just try to do everything to the best of my ability. And so if I'm not experienced at something, I'm going to try to learn as quickly as possible everything I need to know, which is asking a lot of questions. I remember, I can remember my first television rundown meeting. They were using terms I had never heard in my life before, like B-roll. So I'm writing all these things down. And after the meeting, I went over to a guy I made friends with, and I go, all right, what does this mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And they help educate. So, it's asking a lot of questions. and then sitting in a lot of edit bays, watching things get put together, sitting in control rooms, watching how shows get put together. A lot of time and a lot of effort, but it's all worth it at the end of the day.
It is all worth it. Seeing what you're doing now at Sinclair, incredible stuff. Rick Jaffe is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Where are you most proud of in terms of your ability to overcome in this business, and when you had to go to your persistence most?
Well, you learn you're only as good as the people that you work with and the people you work for. And so the ability to trust people and the ability to listen, like I'd said previously, because I don't have all the answers. I'm the first person to tell you I don't have all the answers, but I listen well. And the more people that you get involved in a project, the better the project's going to be, in my opinion, because you have multiple people involved in it. And if they feel like they have a stake in it too, they're going to be much more, give much more effort involved as well, as rather than if I'm saying, no, we're going to do it this way. It's always going to be this way. I'm not changing, blah, 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 blah. But by listening to people and going, oh, that's a good idea. Why don't we try it that way? It's always served me really well.
Where do you find in your career, Rick, in your approach, that you're most perfectionistic, that is, where you're hardest on yourself, you critique yourself the most?
That's very true. And, it's funny because whenever talent's coming up and things like that, I would go, you have to watch yourself, because I can tell you certain things, but you're going to notice things when you watch yourself more than I can tell you. But it's the same way for me. Whenever I'm involved in a show, I'll watch it over and over and over again until, it's funny. And I know you probably feel the same way when you're done with the show, going, oh, I could have done this a little better. Oh, I could have done that a little better. But by watching it, multiple times and going, okay, let's see how we can make it better. It always turns out better when you can make some adjustments here and there.
What's the record for how many times you've gone back and watched a single show?
Wow, that's a good question. So when I was at NESN, the New England Sports Network, for a while, we did these shows, these specials, that we would probably have 5 or 6 different producers in the room watching as we were putting these shows together. We probably went back into an edit bay, no lie, 8, 9 times, 10 times, and watched this show, our special, over and over again. Oh, you know what? What if we added this B-roll instead of that? Or what if we take out that and add that other part back? And everybody had a say in it. It was really fun. One of the more, again, a learning. I had been in the business for a while, but when I went to NESN, that was something that we didn't even do at Fox, where you'd get 6 or 7 producers in a room to evaluate a show that you were doing, and everybody had a say in it, which was great. I thought it was, wow, this is really cool. And we'd sit in there and, the interviews were 3 or 4 hours long that we were cutting down to, an hour show, but it was really a good experience for me. I think one of the things I've learned, you're never too old to learn.
Well, in a room with all those other producers, what did you bring, Rick, that the other producers didn't?
Well, I'm older, as you might know by the gray hair. So I've been around, and so I've had a lot of experience at many different places. And so I hope I bring a little bit of experience and wisdom to the table about how to tell stories. But again, not being afraid to listen to what others had to say as well, and making those shows the best they could possibly be.
When you are being out in LA and doing a lot of work there, when you're stuck in traffic, Rick, how often does your mind think about a project, a work-related item?
Luckily for me, I only live like 3.5 miles from the office. So I don't get stuck in traffic all that much, but I can tell you, even when I'm home, it's tough to turn the brain off, especially when you have different things that are coming up. It's just a constant, our jobs aren't normal, as you know. They're 24/7, 365 with the way sports is nowadays. It never ends. So if you've got a special project coming up or anything like that, I never find, it's hard to turn the brain off.
What have you found have been helpful tools to try at least to turn the brain off at times?
That's a good question. Going for a walk at the beach. I don't, the Sinclair office is in Santa Monica, which isn't far from the beach. And so I don't live that far from the beach either, but walks along the beach sometimes can clear the head.
What are you thinking about when you're walking on the beach?
Trying not to think about work. That's not always successful. But you just try to separate it a little bit because it does involve so much of your days and so much of your nights. And a lot of times at night, you're watching sports on television too. So it's, but the beautiful thing about what we do, and I think we're in a rare group of people, you and I, that we love our jobs because they're not really jobs. I mean, we get to watch sports for a living, which is pretty fun. And so even on our tough days, it's not too shabby.
True. What is different though when you're watching a sporting event and say a fan is watching a sporting event?
Another good question. You're watching it from a different perspective of, you're watching it as a producer. So you're going, I would have done that differently, or I would have taken that shot, or I would have done this. So yeah, you don't watch it as a normal fan. It's kind of tough to watch as a normal fan because you're always in that mode of looking and critiquing like it was your broadcast, like you were in charge of it.
Needless to say, there are a lot of fans of Rick Jaffe. And Rick, this has been such a fun conversation. Of course, Rick, head of digital video at Sinclair, has done incredible work there. Everywhere he goes, just such a bright reputation in the business, has helped so many people along the way. Rick, thanks so much for joining me. I'm Bryan Fenley on the conversation, and really appreciate your candid chat and your transparency through the business.
Thanks for having me, Bryan. I really appreciate it.